The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, and this is Brad Spates from Guide Technologies. Thank you for signing up for our Infor CSI four-step webinar series. This is the step one, the basics of Infor OS. Pat Armour, senior consultant with Guide Technologies, will be driving the webinar today. I'm going to take, normally we would keep everybody on mute, but since we have a relatively small audience, I'm going to kind of open it up so that we can have some discussion. So I see Randy and Pete, are you, I guess, trying to take you off of mute, but well, in the meantime, if you have a question, please use the chat function. And I'll continue to try to get everybody off of mute so we can have a discussion if we can. Okay, with that, Pat Armour.
Oh, hey, so this is Randy. I've been able to unmute myself, but you have to do it first, and then I can after.
Okay. So Pat. So I guess I've muted Pat. Oh, okay. Sorry about that, Pat.
It's all right. I was like, well, I guess it wasn't that interested in hearing what I had to say.
Really? Okay, I think we're back on track. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. All right.
I just have a blue screen though.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go.
Right. Okay. So welcome everybody. Thanks for taking time to look into this iOS and for operating services. If you're not familiar with it, it's a framework that CSI and other ERP and other Infor applications works with. We'll be talking about some of the details and we'll go more into depth as we go through this web series. So Infor Operating Services has a lot of different pieces to it. As you can kind of see here, some of this may or may not make sense today, right? But this, there's a ton of things we could talk about, but I really want to focus on just a few key elements. And I really want to focus on what is ION, what is Infor's ION do, Mingle, which is a social collaboration type product, how the home pages interact with that, and how CSI overall or Sightline Cloud Suite Industrial works with it. And I really want to talk about the relationships between these three and put some context around why you might even want to use it or would use it. Some business cases as to why using this platform makes sense. So I'm going to start with ION. So ION stands for Intelligent Open Network. Really the key here, to put it in simple terms, is it's a one-stop shop to be able to monitor and integrate and create events around your business processes and around integrations to other products. So with that, we'll be talking about ION Connect. We also will talk about workflows and event management. Now, for those Sightline people out there, event management, this is not the application event management inside of Mongoose or CSI. This is the event management activity inside ION. So we'll touch on the ION desk, which is really our command center for everything. We won't get into APIs and Pulse so much today. Pulse is really behind the scenes. It's not really necessary that we know it. And I think, we have advanced concepts later, and we'll go into APIs, which are connections, other connections to third-party applications. Okay. So that's what we'll start with before we jump into Mingle. So I'm going to talk about the framework here and show you some of the pieces to the puzzle. And then we're going to come in and look at some other things around the communication points of Mingle. So the first part is like, let's look what makes this up, how we operate, how we work with ION, and then what the messages and notifications are. And then we'll come back and look at like how we would communicate that to the organization. And there's all different ways that we can do that. All right, so again, why do we even care about this interconnectivity? And one of the key points is, so we used to have, if you're those of you in IT, in the 80s, 90s, things were usually point-to-point integrations. Take a really nice, deep, functional third-party product and connect it to the next one, and so forth and so on. And we know there was problems with that. And then we kind of moved into more of the whole monolithic, I guess you would call it, integration points with, SAP, Oracle, kind of said, no, we have everything in our package, right? We have all of these modules. You no longer need to worry about buying that one and that one and that one. Problem was, they were very limited, I think, in some of their functionality. So what ION helps us do is not only connect with other applications that you might use with inside of Infor, but to those third-party applications. So I'm sure in any business, an ERP isn't going to solve every problem for you. So there's other challenges that happen inside the organization that you may need outside applications to work with. Okay? And those could be anything, really. We could be talking about any third-party application, another Infor application. We could be talking about things as simple as a flat file, data warehouse, and any of the options where we might go mine data, legacy applications that you might have. All right. And so some of the things that we want to do around that is get out of the world of point-to-point integration. So we don't want to have that point-to-point integration. Although with CSI, with Sightline, it's extremely powerful with Mongoose to be able to write web services and connect to the IDEO layers and do that. And a lot of times programmers, they really like to jump in there. That's what they know. But what ION allows us to do is do it without code, so that we don't have any core code being changed whatsoever, not the stored procedures or the middle layer. Right? It's easier. It's an easier application, so I no longer need to have high-end or even middle-tier developers to do the work. So we're going to see some of that. So it's less expensive usually. You don't need your partners to get you going. Most of this stuff is point and click and just understanding attributes and the way the table structures work inside the applications that you're trying to connect. Another good reason when we talk about monitors and flows is there's so much need, especially anymore, for compliance, right, and process controls. And a lot of times we're asked, hey, so is this FDA certified? Is this certified for these types of compliance and ISO? And we say, well, yeah, the application is, but really that's inside of your business process, right? That's what controls you have when you're audited that show that you're managing that. It's not necessarily the system. However, we can utilize some of the monitors, workflows, and scripting to allow us to build a lot of that process control and compliance in here that just adds an additional layer. So digital signaturing and workflow chains and things like that. And the last piece is really just extending your business processes. So we can utilize the applications within to not only notify people of things, but we can also, so we can notify inside the system. So if something happens, like an event, we can also look at an event that would happen between two systems. So for example, if I had EAM, which is Enterprise Asset Management in Infor, and I put in a purchase requisition, I could have ION push that over and create that as a requisition needing approval inside of CSI. And we can also do what's not been done. And I like that approach because what that actually means is you can monitor things that haven't happened. So For example, if you use Salesforce.com and you have that integration, let's say, and you've created a quote inside of there, and it hasn't created, let's say, the estimate order inside of CSI within a given time frame, it can notify someone. Or if we know that there's been inventory in stock and reserved against a customer order and the shipment hasn't happened, we can notify people. So we can notify events based on what hasn't happened as well as what has happened. So that's a pretty cool feature. So there's a lot of different things that we can do in terms of how we connect things. But the key to it is really, first of all, the connection points. And the connection points within Cloud Suite are designed to be what I'm connecting to inside of CSI and or third party. Right? So these are the connection points that I have set up for our system. And a lot of them, if you know the naming convention, so this is Cloud Suite Industrial to the Dallas, to the, we have a demo database Dallas, but that would be your configuration. We also have this one's XM, which is expense management for Infor. This is how CSI connects to all of the applications that Infor uses that are edge products, what we call. So Factory Track, if you're using Burst BI, if you're using CPQ, if you're using EAM, those all flow through connection points. So let's just look at one. And really what we're doing here is we're working with what's called a BOD, or a business object document. And really all that is a way to communicate with system, Cloud Suite Industrial, that is already established. So we don't have to go back and write. So I look at it as an equation. So on the left-hand side of the equation, you have an application. And on the right side, you have CSI. You don't have to go in and write all of the business rules around every field or form that you want to deal with inside the application, like a point-to-point would be. You just really need to manage the BOD and how they move back and forth. And all we really talk about with the BOD is we're using an XML document. Okay, so we're passing data between systems, which gets us out of working with the code. So now we have less options, or now we have less potential for failures. When we write inside the code, our code can change, things can change, we're not passing a certain parameter. But when we're just working with the data sets, it's a little bit easier to manage. Those usually don't change a lot in the multiple applications. So you can see here, we just have a few documents that work with CSI, but this is the set of data that gets passed and or synced between the two. So there's really only two things that you have to know when you set up document flows or connection points, and that is the noun, we call them the nouns and the verbs. So the noun is the data. So the code definition or example here, sync work center, right? We know what a work center is. Work center is in CSI, and that syncs obviously between Factory Track, because that's our shop floor module to collect the data. So we want that to sync and keep those in sync. There are multiple different verbs, and the verb is the sync or the process or the new, and there's about 8 of them. And really all you're telling the system to do is take this data set and do this thing with it. What do you want to do? Well, I want to sync it. So that's an immediate back and forth bidirectional connection that just keeps those two things in sync whenever you need them. Process or add, those are things where we need to actually do something, right? So we need to create a customer order or purchase requisition inside of CSI or outside of CSI if we're passing it to the other application. We might want to pull in a data set and have that data set create, let's say, a forecast. So I get forecast, maybe I put that into a data warehouse and I want to pull that out from and put that in and create those as CSI forecasts. I could do that. There's a whole list of BODs that are created, and they're the typical ones that you would expect for shipping, receiving, customer orders, invoicing, AP financials, transactions, you know, the major points in there. And there's a whole list of those that detail also what event inside CSI already creates the BOD to get transacted. So real quick, if anyone uses replication inside of CSI, that's really how we manage the flow of the business object document, is in the replication category. So again, this stuff is all set up, and all you're doing is saying, okay, what do I want to use? So there's one called a category called the Enterprise Service Bus, and that's really how we send XML documents. And if I come in here and I want to do materials sync, for example, there's just a method that gets called, and I can tell that method to be on or off, basically. Okay. They come pretty much all off because we don't, if you're not really using them, we don't want those BODs to fire, you know, and create a lot of data that you're not using. But, you know, essentially when you start using this, you'll come in and decide, well, you know, we use transfer orders with a WMS system or with a transportation system. So we want those synced. Right. So you will decide if it's not a standard Infor product, what you need to replicate. Yes, you can customize BODs, so you can create custom columns and data sets. So if, for example, we're talking about you know, the items field, and there's an attribute that you need in the external system, or let's say in work centers inside EAM, there's some attributes that you want to keep that aren't in CSI. You can create and take those UETs, those user extended data sets, and push those in the BOD as well. Right. So again, we're not working with any code, we're just working with data sets. So data flows is really, this is the most important piece of how ION works. So for example, I have a data flow between Infor document management and ERP, which in this case our ERP is Cloud Suite Industrial. I have one between Mingle and the ERP. And I think I have EAM down there as well. I have one to Burst and so forth. So what we can do is we can go in and take a look at this and say, all we're doing when we create these is using a very simple application, which is drag and drop, and then filling out parameters. So it's kind of like a wizard for us already. We don't have to write JSON messaging or scripting or anything for the most part. So we can just go into the pieces and start looking at what we're supposed to do. So in this case, you can add an application or a database or a file, an API call, or a message queue. So you can call message services like inbox, outbox calls to other applications. So we're really just picking the activity that we want to do in our flow. And in this case, I'm connecting to an application Infor document management. And in between there, we have a sync, so that what we have is the XML document that we're calling. And in this case, we're calling a capture document. Right? This one's specifically designed that anytime I print, let's say a purchase order or an invoice in CSI, and I'm using Infor document management, it will automatically attach it to the record. Okay, so if we say, well, you know, we print this PO, how do we know we get a copy of it? I have to put it out on the file server, or I have to use, you know, an application or attached documents or something. You can have that automatically done. Okay? And so that's what this exact example is doing. And then we go in and say, okay, what's on the right side? What application are we connecting to? Well, we're connecting to CSI. And in my case, I have 3 sites. So if you have multiple sites, you can connect to one or all of them. So I'm connecting to those. And then there's nothing output from that, because this is just taking the document and putting it into, attaching it to ERP. And really, it's that simple to use connection points and data flows. So it's really just understanding what applications you're connecting and what the data points are. Now, a lot of times we get the question, hey, yeah, that's great, but what happens if I need to do something with the data records, right? So there might be cases in which we need to transform the data. So let's say that we are inputting Let's say we do time studies on the shop floor, and we pull in run times for each resource or work center. And we have that in a file. But we want to change it. Let's say it was in minutes, per piece or something like that. And in CSI, we want it to be in hours per piece. So we can use the mappings to do that. Okay? There's two types of mappings that can happen. One is a graphical mapping, and that's where we just want to take something and change it. Maybe we want to map column A, which is called run time, or let's say time, average time, let's say is the column, and you need to map that to CSI, and you want that to be in the work center or in the resource file for runtime, right? So the mapping is really just a left and right connection between two applications. So there's the graphical mapping, and it's really just point and click. If you've ever used an Access database or anything like that, where you're just saying, okay, this one equals that one, that's what you're doing with the graphical mapping. And you can also do some transformation. So if it is a telephone number you're pulling in, let's say you get a lead list and you want to pull in the customer or the information, and one of them is the telephone number, but that could be 513-859-6543 with dash, without dash, with parentheses, sometimes with a dot, right? But what you want to do is no matter what, you want to change it into an input mask, so it would always be the same. That where you can use graphical mapping as well. Sensitive data mapping is where you might want to strip out information that is proprietary or sensitive inside the information. Okay, so if there's ever a time that we need to connect to an application, let's say a payroll service, and we don't want or a credit card service, but let's say the payroll service, and we don't want our social security code to come back into CSI, we can strip that data out using the sensitivity mapping. So we can just either hide it as a token value, or we can just get rid of it altogether. And we're going to do in one of the advanced series, we'll go in and build some of these things and kind of see how they're done. Fairly straightforward. And the last piece is API flows. And again, we're not going to talk about that today, so I don't have any to talk about. But an API is just a connection to a third party. Sometimes you can't connect using the connector. Sometimes the product that we're talking to requires that they have their authorization, right, and all their information passed through something similar as ION. So we would use the API flow to call theirs and then do the same, essentially the same thing. Okay, so BODs are bidirectional. They're real time, so you can get real time information based on the events that happen, and they're completely customizable. All right. So that's how connection points and ION Connect works. Before I get into flows though, I'm going to go to OneView. So OneView is the central center for all things ION if I need to do troubleshooting. So go back to home here. So this tells me high level, okay, I've got to unhandle, I got a BOD that's in error. Okay, or if I have an event that has a problem, we can see workflows that have been scheduled or have paused or are stuck or all that. But if I want to know detail about that, I can go to OneView and I can find the actual document flow that's happening and figure out what the problem is. It'll show me what the issues are. So if I wanted to go in and look at, well, let's just do supplier. And we can search on names if we know them. Actually, I need customers. Sorry about that. Get my stuff. So I just, in this case, because I know I have tons and tons of data records, I don't want to, show hundreds of records. Last hour is going to be all. All right. So what is this screen? Well, what this is it's telling me these are the interactions that CSI has had with, in this case, their workflows and monitors, but this is data that's been passed between them. So now, if I have any problem with the document flow, they would be highlighted red or yellow, depending on the error. And I can come in and take a look at the actual flow and all the components that are handled between it and see what the problem is. You can think of it really like a mail service. So basically, okay, I'm going to send you something. You're going to accept it. Once you accept it, you're going to do something with it, right? You might process it. And then once the process is done, you might send it back. Why am I, 1D is slow. There we go, okay. So essentially that's what we're doing, is just following a timeline through of what we're doing. So it tells us who we're connecting to, IDM and Mingle. It's an application connection point. We can go in and see that the message has been sent, okay? And then we can see what the document actually is, so what data is being sent, and how the policies are managing. So what created it to actually get sent? So was there an event? Was there an activation? Did we kick it off through a workflow? And so forth. So this one, as we can see, is green because it's made it all the way through the process. This is extremely helpful for troubleshooting, especially when we're talking about not workflows and monitors, but outside systems. So another problem with point-to-point integration is what I call message in a bottle. So, you know, you send it out and you hope it gets there. And if it gets there, now I've got 14 different things I have to monitor and take care of. And now I've got to go look at log files and everything else. In ION case, you don't. It's going to track everything for you, immediately give you alerts and failures, and immediately allow you to drill in and find out what the problem is. Okay. So now let's talk about monitors and workflows. Monitors, monitors are the event management. Okay, monitors are simply something that we want to go in and create a rule to monitor something, typically something within inside CSI, but it doesn't have to be. So for example, a monitor could be, here I have an example for performing a quantity adjustment with a high value or quantity. So if somebody receives 1 million of something in a quantity adjustment in CSI, I want to know about it, right? I want to check on what's the problem with that. Or in this case, a PO has been put in for $2 million. I want to be notified, or management needs to be notified about that to make sure it's correct, or whatever the action would be. So if we go in, this interface works very much like the mapping with the ION Connect. So we're really just calling out the BOD that we're going to work with, or the table. In this case, it's inventory adjustment. So that's really what we would be doing. Then we just go in and follow. We just kind of follow the breadcrumbs here, and we say, okay, what are our attributes? Well, attributes are just field names. Okay. So if I wanted to add new field names to this, I just click add and I select it from the list. This is where it takes a little bit of understanding of CSI, because you may not exactly know, you know, the document ID, or you may not know what quantity unit code. You know, you have to understand a little bit about what the fields are called. But luckily, we have CSI with the Mongoose interface, so you can go in, you can look at the screen, right? You can go in to find the form in CSI, go into the field and find about, and it will lead you down the path. Or you can go into design mode, and it'll tell you, you know, what field is linked to what name. Okay, so there's ways to find it out if you're not that familiar with it. I've been working with this product for about 25 years, so I'm pretty good at knowing what each of those things mean. But that's really the only tough part about creating these. So the next thing we do is we create conditions, and we just basically say, you know, what are conditions that I want to be alerted on? And in this case, I just said, well, it's a quantity greater than or equal to 1,000. So if I have a transaction that's greater than 1,000, I want to be notified about it. You can have multiple conditions here, okay? And then you can create the rule. And in this case, it's just a simple rule type. I'm saying take that condition. The condition was quantity, because I could have multiples here, and alert every time, or alert every 3 times, 4 times, whatever you need to do there. And then that is really what's going to go out in a listener and kind of wait for data to find. What do we want the alert to actually do? So in this case, I just made it pretty simple, quantity more than 1,000. And if you put in the shift space key, it will show all of the attributes that you are allowed to use that you added earlier. And so in this case, it would be the unit of measures, adjusted, miscellaneous receipt, and so forth, just some wording. And I think I have transaction number. So if we wanted to drill into that, create that drill back, which is really what drill backs would be. So for example, if I have this pop up in my inbox, or if I have this pop up on my Mingle page, and I want to click into the material transaction number, and I create that drill back, now that it knows the trans number will open material transactions form and filter it on that transaction number. So immediately, right from the notification, I can drill into the actual CSI data that I need to do my research. Okay, so that's a pretty good feature. Distribution, just as simple as that. Who do I want to notify when this alert goes out? In this case, I have my generic CSI user getting emailed. I have a group called inventory and a group called planning. So with inside Mingle, you can create groups of people based on the rules and responsibilities for distribution lists. So now it's going to send this notification to everyone in the inventory and the planning group. We can create escalations and reminders. So if this hasn't been sent, okay, not sent out or not been processed after a certain amount of days or a certain amount of time, or a rule would exist that I got an out of office message from the person and I need it to go somewhere else or be escalated to a designee or a manager after a certain time, we can do that. And we can also just set up a reminder. So, you know, we're all busy and we forget to maybe check that ACN. So tomorrow, every day it just flags me, you know, it pings me again and says, that, you know, here, you have this monitor to take care of. And we won't worry about the workflow. So that's really all the applications, no, I don't want to say that, applications are doing in here. And when you're ready to activate them, you just come in and you activate. So if I wanted to activate this, it's going to go out, make sure there's no errors or issues. And now it's going to operate the way I said it was. So it's an immediate, I don't have to go publish anything. I don't have to, you know, compile anything. It's live and it's working. So as long as the baud is already flowing, which, you know, I have to know what baud passes customer data, but once that's done, then this will work. Another thing we can do is have an alarm. So I created one for today, and the inventory monitor that I showed you had a quantity of 1,000, right? That was built in, like hard coded. But let's say I don't want it to be hard coded. Let's say I want it to be an inventory adjustment, and then I can allow the user to decide what level that should be. Because maybe the stock manager just wants to be notified if it's over 1,000, but maybe the purchasing manager only really needs to be notified if it's over $10,000 or something of that nature. So what we do with a template is we just go in and set up that template. So I'm going inventory adjustment. Here are the attributes that I want to know about. Who is authorized? So who would be able to go in and create an alarm? And then that gives them the capability to do it. I will show that here just in a bit when I get to the Mingle side, because that can be sent through the mobile application, or it can be set up to do with inside a widget inside of Mingle, which we'll talk about shortly. So a user would be able to go in if they have the permissions and say, I want my parameter to be X. So you can think about this in a lot of ways. If the forecast was loaded more than 25% change, any alarm or alert you want where you want the user to input the data of what they want to track and how they want to track it. And then we'll talk just briefly on the workflow. So this is a lot, right? So what's the difference? Well, a monitor is really just an event. I just want to be notified if an event happens, either let somebody know, create a task for somebody to do something. But a workflow, right, has a whole chain of events that might happen inside of it. It's built the same way. So I just have a real simple one here to start the discussion. Very simple. Again, I'm just going to go out and add the parameter that I want. In this case, it's the code that says that the PO's been added to the system. No drawbacks. Go in, PO submitted. My content is that parameter. What are my actions? There aren't any in this case. I'm going to be notified. Purchasing is going to be notified, and I don't have anything else here. Again, once this is turned on, it works immediately with the bots. These little notifications down here are real time showing me what the problems could be. So if I go in and I create something that's an issue, I will get an immediate notification that shows me what's wrong with my workflow, essentially. So you get immediate errors. It's always checking, so you don't have to wait at the end and then process it and then get back a whole bunch of errors and go, oh man, I got to go fix those. They're live right there. So in this case here, I have a little different one. I'm verifying a vendor. Vendor number with that and name has been newly added, and I need you to verify it. And I'm going to send that to whomever needs to have that. Let's say it needs to go to somebody for dunning or for that kind of stuff, or quality checks or any of that. And then I have a pending condition here, which is just a wait. All right. Okay. So this is one that's not turned on, activated, and you'll see across the top, it's the same thing. We're just going to pick tasks or notifications, set different parameters if we need to. We'll talk about the decision. Do I want to kick this off to another workflow? So let's say, a salesperson takes an order and the order gets converted from a prospect to a customer, and I need somebody to be notified that the customer's now been added to check credit. I can kick off the secondary one, which is, go check for customer, but it's driven from a prospect being converted to a customer, something of that nature. And we can have decisions, loopbacks, sub-processes, lots of different things. But really, if you think about a business process, you can model pretty much anything. So in this case, the PO submitted task. Then there's an approval. Please approve this PO. And the actions that I have in here, I created approve and reject, but you could create as many so-called buttons or actions that you want to. It could be I need more information, or needs to be moved to the next person, whatever. We can also use chains, a chain event, to task chain. And what that allows you to do is create an approval matrix. So this is a really great feature, because we always get asked, okay, well, I have a PO that if it's over $1,000, purchasing can approve it, but if it's over $10,000, it needs to go to the controller, right? So that's what we have here with our parameters, and we're just going in as simple as saying greater than, less than, what are my conditions for the PO amount and who's it gets into. And then you can then create those simple approval matrix, or you can actually create business rules that have even more logic built into them, depending on your different business processes. Okay. The task chain then has to be, at the end of the chain, it has to be equal to whatever it was. So if you have voting rights and say 3 people have to approve the ECN out of 4, then that has to occur. Or in this case, it's really just, it's over 10,000, so it has to go through purchasing and then through finance. And you can chain those off. So once purchasing has done it, it can now then be sent to finance, because finance doesn't need to see it, right, if purchasing decides to deny it. And that's really all we're doing. Been approved, send that back. Been rejected, send that back. And an end task. And if we wanted those drawbacks. So that is the workflows. Workflows can be started from a lot of different places. They can be set up based on an event that happens in CSI or another application. They can be set up to generate from another workflow. So we talked about that. They can be manually started. There's also a widget inside Mingle that we'll see here shortly that you can actually select a workflow and kick it off manually. It could come from an external API call. Just a lot of different ways that we can call these processes to happen. Okay. So how does this relate with AES? So if those of you who are using application event services or the event management tools inside of CSI, we can create workflows that would create an AES for us. So there's a wizard that would do that. So if you're familiar with AES, it's a little bit convoluted, and building them, you usually want to copy one because it's kind of, old looking technology, as you know, if you've used it. But this isn't, right? This is very straightforward and graphical, and pretty much a power user can do it. So if I want to create my event handlers to be modeled this way, which is a lot easier, there's a wizard then that can move it to the AES. Maybe I don't want the whole thing in AES. Maybe what I want is just, if it is been submitted, I want it to suspend the record in CSI. Okay. Workflows don't do that out of the box, so they won't suspend records in CSI. But that's where I would connect it to the event management system. So I would do a call to event management, and I would just go in and tell event management to suspend the record. So for that example of the PO has been submitted but not approved, I don't want anybody to be able to go in and make changes to that PO. So I can suspend or lock that record using event management system in CSI, and I could just call that from the workflow. So that's kind of how those interactions work. Okay. And the last flow that we're going to talk about are data flows between external sources database. In this case, I'm using what's known as the data lake. Data lake is the data warehouse that Infor is now provided inside of Infor operating services that holds all of the data for all the applications that you use. But in addition, anything else that you want to put in there. So if you have legacy data you want to pull in, or you have an access database that you want to pull that data in and sync it so that I can use it in, let's say, a report or a BI report, that's what these data flows allow me to do. So they work exactly like the connection points with the mappings and everything. All we're going to do is say, okay, so I'm going to go out, mine the data. What data do I want? Map it to where it belongs inside of CSI, and what the verb's going to be. Is it going to just put it in a field? Is it going to add a new record? Whatever. And then conditions around that. So let's look at some of the ways that we can be notified of these things. So one way is through standard email. In this case, this came from a task that I set up, and a new customer has been added. I need to verify it, and you'll notice it pops up and says new customer 50 has been added. If you remembered, I wrote those little notifications, and I put the little parentheses in them, or colons, whatever those are. Been a long time since I've taken English. So we can then please verify, and we put two actions in here. So do I assign it to me, or I need to assign it to other people? So that's one way we can get our information. We can also get it through the Mingle inbox. Okay, so there's also an inbox that Mingle provides. An example is today I created a vendor number 36, laser specialties. And this is inside my application. So I don't have to go anywhere else. I can see my little dot pops up here, right? And there's an indication of something new. I go in and I see, okay, well, I can assign this to me because I'm going to make the verification, or I'm just going to leave it alone, right? So this is like in the example of a queue. So maybe it's quality, and I don't know what quality manager or what quality person is going to take it next, but I don't want two people working on the same thing. So they would just assign the task to themselves. And then it would move from an inbox to a actual task under the under the task actions here. We can attach documents. If it's in a workflow, that would show us the whole flow and where it is. And we can add custom buttons. So in this case, it's a done because we're not really going to do anything. We're just going to assign. But in the case where I needed to approve or reject, I could create as many buttons over here as I wanted that do those actions. Here's another example of a quantity adjustment. Again, this quantity adjustment was very large. It was for this cherry wood 2000, and this now is my, this is the pulse piece that we didn't talk about, but this is the behind the scenes where now I can expand this and it's going to pass those attributes to that person either through the email or here. And this is the CSI data. So it added, there's my transaction number, the date that it happened, what is it, what part number, what site, what quantity, whatever those attributes that you saw in there, you set those attributes as parameters that you want to see in the attribute section, and then that comes through too, so you can get detail behind that. And if they are highlighted, right, there's a drill back there. So if they underlined, then I know that I can link directly to that from the application. Okay. Alerts, if I have alerts, they're going to show up here. Notifications and tasks. So let's look at the tasks that I have. In this case, it's just a simple one. Vendor 36 was added. I want to show the details. So here, again, I have a task. Assign it to me or assign it to someone else. What are the parameters? Well, this one's a little bit different. I'll put all the attributes in. Where is it in the workflow? In this case, it's on me. It's just on the first step, pending. Well, it was on the pending step. Sorry, there was 2 steps before. So it's pending my approval or assignment, so I can review it. If I want to hand key any notes, you can make the notes field not read only. You can make it editable, and then that can fill out and keep the data behind this. And we can also add attachments. So if I want to add attachments, I could do so right here using the IDM tool. We can also have generic activities sent to us. So here is, I've set up in my parameter setting to get Mingle alerts. I think I've set mine up to be weekly. I would like to get an update of all the alerts and tasks that have been processed or are mine. You can set the parameter up to be only yours and whatever. So in this case, and then it tells me, do I want to look at it in Mingle? So it would open that form up we just had, or maybe I want to look at it inside the inbox. But you could also have CSI and other buttons here as well. Right? So you could just have a daily update, daily summary, or weekly summary of things that are going on. Yeah. If any of you have used Teams or Chat or Slack or any of those, these tasks and notifications and workflows are built somewhat similar in that I can go in and create, not just see the workflow, but I can create social collaboration. So I can share, right, with other individuals inside the organization in my workflow or my task. So if I wanted to share something, I could say who, and these would be defined in Mingle as to what groups you would be able to work with. And then you can put in whatever, and you, supplier, and I can share that. And that would immediately go to whomever I want it to go to. I want it to go to the receiving doc, I hit share, and then immediately that's going to pop up in their in context information. So we didn't talk about in context, which is the last place you can see things before the homepage. But here you can also add viewers in context information to CSI as a ribbon, and I can hide it, expand it, and it shows me the same things. Here's my alerts, any tasks and posts that come through. And the same information, I can go in and say more, and that will drill down into the transaction. So maybe I want to share it with somebody, assign it to myself, or actually view the details. Same form, right? Opens that up. I can see my details just like I could before. So a lot of people say, well, yeah, that's great. So you have it here and there, and you're going to show it to me in home pages, and why? Why is it everywhere? Well, it's everywhere because we really, Infor has decided, hey, let's let's have you work like you live, right? So a lot of times I have an app that I want a notification on. Sometimes I have an email. Sometimes I have my Alexa notify me that my stuff from Amazon showing up today, right? There's all different ways that we want communication back and forth between our systems, and this allows users to really consume the information how it makes sense to them, or what would be the best way for them to accept it, right? If you already get 10,000 emails a day, I really don't want it to send me another email, right? Maybe I want it to just be on my board here as a task or a flow. I'm going to go in here real quick. I don't have a lot of data, but I want to show the alarm. So this is that alarm template that you noticed in here, and this is the widget that would allow you, a user, to create the parameter settings. And this also is a mobile, one of the mobile app, the native mobile apps that's in the Android and the iOS store. So you can download Infor alarms, and then you could actually create the same condition from with inside of there, right? So if I come in and select it, I can then come in and say, all right, well, I want to be notified when the quantity, right, is equal to, greater than, and in my case, I want it to be 2,000, not the 1,000 that was already set up. Right? And you can create multiple details in here. When you're done, you save it. And again, immediate. So now, if any transactions happen in CSI that have that condition, I'm going to get either a notification in my alarms or in my mobile app, or both. Okay. So that's the idea behind Ion and the Ion Connect, and how we connect to other applications, and how we connect to notifications, events, alerts inside CSI. And we're kind of up on time, but the last piece was just to explain some of the widgets and how the homepage actually works. This is quick. There's not a lot to it. You can create, they already come out of the box with ones that are pre-built by role, but you can create your own. So I can go in, I just created this one. A widget is just a set of data that you want to put on your page. There is a whole host of information, or a whole host of, I think there's 300 or 400 built. Some are directly for CSI. Some of them are just generic things like announcements in the company, or feeds, posts, alerts. Some of them are actually for other applications, like the application builder. So if you know what that is and you build an application inside CSI with the app builder, you can post it right into here. We can pull from BI if we're using Burst, if we're using something like that. Can also pull from third parties using those connection points. Right? Lots and lots of different things that we can do. Right? These can not only be informational, but they can be graphs and bells. You can add actually critical numbers. So if you're familiar with critical numbers, we can add that right to it. Add a widget in there for a critical number, and then it works somewhat similar to how it would work inside CSI, but I can say I want to see my inventory value, and now that widget will be my inventory value, and I can create the display to look however you want it to be, just like you can inside CSI. I now want that to be, let's say, an angular gauge, which is one of my favorites. And I've changed it. Okay. Some of these can also be transactional. So you can add a quick order entry, and you could actually enter your order right inside the widget. It's kind of a dumbed down version, so to speak, of the CSI page. Can they be tailored? Absolutely, because all these are what's called dot home pages. So they're forms, just like you would build any form in CSI's Mongoose, but they are, you put an extension dot home, and obviously this is big, so it's not going to look right on this screen, right? It's September or August, but it would look good framed out in that little widget. And there's a document that explains what size to make the form and everything, so it'll work right. So really, even if there's 300 or 400 widgets out there and you want other widgets, other critical number, report, or form, if you're familiar with Mongoose and you have a team that does that, just create your own forms and widgets and drop those in as well. Okay, well, that really sums up the pieces that we kind of went through. Again, in the next series of webinars, we'll be touching on some advanced concepts and digging down a little bit more into how we create tasks and things. And those aren't really set either. And I think in the next one, I might, if there's a good number of people on, we might take a little poll too to see if there's one in particular area that we want to focus on more than another, because this is really for you all, right? It's not as much for us. We want to make sure you're getting the information that you need. So what I think is cool to show you may not be what you think is pertinent to your situation. So with that, Brad, if there's any questions that came through or you want to open it up.
Yeah, everybody is off mute, so if there's any questions, feel free to ask them. We've got a little bit of time still if somebody has questions. In the meantime, our next webinar series event is October 22nd. That's a Thursday. And I guess for those that had trouble with the links, those have been fixed again today, and we'll keep monitoring them to make sure that the registration links are working properly. So if no more questions, then thank you for attending, and thank you very much, Pat.
No problem, Brad. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.